All right, we're live. Let's get into this. Hey, thanks everybody for deciding to come and join me on this event. I'm really excited to share the information that I promised I would with you. On the engagement that we had in LinkedIn, we talked a little bit about stakeholders, whether they be assertive stakeholders or difficult stakeholders, and we had some good conversations in there, lots of different perspectives. My name's Jonathan, and I'm a civil engineer by background. I've been in the industry as a project manager for over 25 years. And I want to share with you what it's like from my perspective in my industry. I mean, we all have high pressure, high stakes sectors that we work in, but I can only give you the experience from my perspective, and hopefully that will add value in whatever industry that you're in too. So to begin with, I'm going to get straight into it and set the scene, what sort of environment it is and working with difficult stakeholders. I'll give you a quick overview of the principle behind what I'm trying to share with you. And then I'll get into that case study and we'll quickly talk through what that was about. So we have difficult stakeholders. They come from us from every which way that, that we work in. They can come from any angle at any time. And stakeholders are people who I consider who are both external to the project organisation, but they're also internally within the organisation. And these are people that we need to manage very closely because they're all valuable contributors, or we at least want them to be valuable contributors towards our project. They're all very crucial to the success of the project. But the hard truths are that we do have difficult, demanding stakeholders. And a lot of them, well, many of them can be quite relentless if we're not managing them and leading them properly. They can come at you from, at any time, from any position, whether, like I said, internal within the organisation or external to the organisation. And they can come at you haphazardly in an uncoordinated way. And they can quite often put you right on the spot with their abstract thinking, their abstract ideas. They suit them, but they're quite detached, really, from where you're at with the project. And they can quite often come in on the front foot, complaining and putting you firmly on the spot and feeling bewildered. And so, what this means is really that you're working with stakeholders who are out of touch. They're not really considering what is going on with you in your role and everything else that you've got to deal with. They're all about their own perspective, and that's the most important thing for them. And of course, that can be completely out of touch with where you're going with your project. But you want to turn this around. So there is a way around doing this, and that's to go about leading your stakeholders so that they become more of a participatory role, and it's more of a balance amongst all of the things that you've got going on your project. You want the specific areas that these people are getting involved with to be, coordinated. You want them to be along the journey with you. You want them to have an idea of how things are falling into place as you're going along in the project too. So you want them to go from being detached and abstract to more inclusive and, up to speed with where things are at. Does that make sense so far? And then, of course, these people, when you do get this right, you've got your stakeholders being tuned in, and they're really aligned with where you're going, and they have realistic expectations that you can both work to and dovetail together to get the outcomes that you're both expecting. Working closely, and cooperatively with a shared understanding. So now I want to share you one key principle. In the modules that I deliver for my coaching clients, that I go through 5 key principles which are jam-packed full of value. And some of the ones that we talk through are how to win their attention when they've got plenty of things going on in their life anyway and in their world. We get to look behind the scenes, behind the facade of each of your stakeholders. And then we look to how to invoke understanding. But now today I want to talk to you about how to avoid stealth disasters with your stakeholders. And this is what ties in to the case study that I want to share with you. Because, you know, it makes sense fundamentally and intrinsically to each of us that when we are, and this is supported by the business and psychological studies that I've read, which are to say that, you know, top-down authority directives, you know, people who come at you with a single direction and they're not involving you in the way that this is going to be played out, this is really stifling innovation, and it also creates a problem, a disconnect in people wanting to be creative in their problem solving. So it stifles productivity and coming up with much better ideas when you're just given a one-way driven kind of instruction or directive to follow. And of course, not only that does it affect your projects directly, but individuals are performing, you know, 50% less productivity. They're 50% less likely to engage in the process of working with this individual, to work through the projects with you. And all of this, it takes on, individuals take on an unauthentic role where they don't feel connected or aligned with what's going on or what's needed to be done. And there's confusion and disorientation. And when you're a project manager or an engineer that's involved in all of this, then you take on a whole burden of stress and anxiety that comes along with that. But we want to be able to turn this around, you know, so we want to be able to just not allow, I mean, there's one perspective where if you are one of those leaders, to have another look at what you're doing. But really where I'm coming from is for people who are in projects, running projects or aspects of projects, to be able to search within themselves to find that agency to take responsibility for those consequences that we just discussed earlier that have been exposed by business and psychological studies in terms of the impacts on people and performance, and to, you know, to find a way of working through these problems so that you can both come out the other end working collaboratively, you know, with more open cooperation. And doing it with a shared understanding as well. I mean, this is absolutely critical to all of this, is working through it so you can kick it off with a shared understanding and an understanding of what the risks are that are involved and the consequences and potential consequences. That's the real aim, that's the guts to all of this. And then, this is another one of the this is the fifth key principle in the module that I deliver to, which is to follow the path less painful, which hopefully speaks for itself. And then we go into a workshop session. But before that, I'm going to just talk to you about this case study that I promised you. So there's a project manager on a multi-million dollar, you know, it around the $1 billion mark project, huge mega project. And Elle was a project manager who was managing one aspect of it. And so she was fully engaged with a lot of stakeholders, a lot of landowners. It was a big project that affected a lot of landowners. And her role was to be able to build a relationship on the ground with these landowners and then open up a pathway for the construction activities to come on through. And by keeping these landowners on side. So she understood the criticality of it on the critical path of your program, where you don't want to delay the construction activities from coming through according to their program, because of the delays and the costs, the high costs that are involved with wasting even a day of construction activity. But what she was faced with early on was it wasn't even her direct line manager that came to speak with her, but it was two senior persons that came together to looking out for their own interests predominantly without considering thoroughly enough the impacts and consequences to other elements of the project. But what happened was that, yeah, Elle was called into this meeting, and she was put on the spot to get agreement with all of these landowners to agreement for construction to come out on site within the next 2 or 3 months. And this was to avoid impacts from potential weather, because that time of the year is going to be impacting the program or the productivity of the project, if you like. But the thing is that she felt really uneasy about this and whether those expectations were realistic. I mean, she spoke up about it, but not really in a very convincing way, because all she was faced with were these more senior positions buddying up together and actually putting a lot of pressure on her to that this is a realistic expectation and that it must be occurring. But there were consequences, because when you look back at all of the landowners that Elle had been building a relationship up with, she'd built up a trusting and open relationship, very cooperative relationship with these people. But then she started applying a pressure on them to, do the work that they're required to do in order to make way on the ground, a lot of expense and a lot of effort on the part of many landowners to clear the pathway for this construction project to come through. And then she realized as time was going on that this wasn't going to be realistic for a number of different reasons. But then she felt like she didn't want to go back and tell the senior management that there were going to be some delays, there were going to be consequences, there are lots of local knowledge that came in that really could have impacted the schedule and the cost of the project. But she didn't want to, first of all, go against an agreement that she'd already established up front with these senior people. But what she was at risk of doing was turning up as somebody with a negative bent that was going to stifle the morale and the momentum that this project had already, established. It was going to affect a lot of people that have already put in a lot of work to get to this point. But so it just carried on. And then when the reality came to light, that it was no longer a point that could be debated, it became fact. Things were not going to go according to plan. Elle had to go back to all of these landowners and tell them that everything that she'd been discussing with them and advising them and committing to them wasn't going to happen. And guess what? The consequences of that were so many of those landowners that she built that relationship with turned against her. And then it just became an ongoing, the trust had been dispelled and cooperation had literally evaporated. So it became a really rocky road for the remainder of their involvement with those landowners. And it had ripple effects continuously for many months on that project. So that's what I wanted to share with you. And it was like, when you look back, by taking on that, if you like, that assertiveness and being almost feeling as though she was coerced into doing something that she didn't feel was the right thing to do. She didn't follow through with exploring any of this in more detail. It was like walking into quicksand and being expected to pull herself out, which is not a situation that anybody wants to get involved with. But now I'm going to share this screen again once more. Just try and get a couple more minutes. I want to share with you a few how-tos, some tips on how you can really, in the moment, nip this sort of problem in the bud. So let me get to sharing the screen again. And this is what we do in the workshop. So what we've got is we're introducing you to the high value engagement model. This is where we're dealing with stakeholders, difficult stakeholders, or any sort of stakeholders in the moment. And then we move forward into, what do we do on reflection of that conversation? And then what's going on moving forward? So how do we continue to keep that positive cooperation moving forward? But I'm going to share with you just this one for now. And I'll be as quick as I can with it as well, but I'm hoping that you'll get the idea. So we've got three things in the moment that we can do. We're in that difficult, high-stakes situation, in that and you could be dropped with an issue pretty quickly that sort of bewilders you, like you're trying to get to grips with what this is all about. So you have a buffer. You give yourself a buffer so you can start being more cognizant of the situation that you're in. And then we get into the reveal. Well, I'll talk to you, and then we talk about the twist. Right, I'm going to quickly go through what these are. So the buffer is so the stakeholder approaches you unexpectedly in any situation. And the reveal, well, you lead them. Again, this is about you tapping into your own agency and leading the situation. Lead them to reveal their strategy, their motivation, and where it all came from in the first place. And then the twist. So now, well, in those first two, you're sort of getting their perspective. Now the twist is about getting them to look at what the expectations are for you and how you're going to go about doing this. And the actual tips that I want to give you and share with you now are when you are in that moment where you're being dropped into this situation, you've got to think on your feet fast. You don't want to rush into any agreement. So you pause, you recognize what's going on, you're feeling a bit, the blood's rushing to your head perhaps, or feeling a bit dumbfounded. Just pause and relax, and then you could repeat the last three words that they said, which is, we want you to go out there and prepare the properties for construction to come in 2 months' time. So you could repeat by saying, construction in 3 months' time. Then you just pause to let that sink in, wait and listen, because what you're doing is you want this person to actually hear what they've told you. So it's like they're speaking to themselves again. And then if they haven't got it, you can repeat it again and repeat it up to 3 times, if you like, until they actually go, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Because you're getting them to question it every time, just to make sure that we're on the right track here. That's exactly what you want me to do. And so the reveal now. So what I'm advising now is why, if you're asking why this and why that, you're implying doubt in their mind, if you know what I mean. So it's going to trigger this other person more likely onto being on the defensive. And that's where things could get aggressive depending on the type of person that you're talking to. So what you want to ask is, so what are we trying to accomplish here? And it's one that you can pick 1 or 2 or any of these, or create your own what question. But the purpose is you want to dig behind to find out what the guts of what they're saying is all about. And what's brought this on us today? What about this is important to you? And that's a more personal question, because there might be some sort of personal attachment to this decision. And that's another exploration that we go through in some of our coaching programs. And then finally, with the twist, you want the other person to look at it from your perspective or from another perspective. If it's a demand, if it's an unrealistic demand, this is the type of question you want to ask. But you got to think that you're in this together with the other person. You don't want to be, we're all about, in Project Samurai, we're all about building trust, building openness, building cooperation, for the immediate term, medium term, and for the long term, because ultimately it's been demonstrated that this is what brings success to projects. So how can I do this? How can I do this? Now we've established you want to get construction in 3 months. You can also layer this up with, if you know straight away what the risks and consequences are, then you can bring those up in this moment. But that's really what we talk about, and we cover that because it's most likely to be part of something that you reflect on after having this meeting, and we talk about that in the on reflection section of this engagement model. So there's some quick tips for you. I know time's pushing on. So I just want to close. Here's some more worksheets that we talk through. These are some of the things that we go through, a bit further on. And then I say, right, it's over to you guys, because it's all about implementation. That's the whole point of this. We want to be able to give you tools, tactics, ideas that you can use straight away in your projects. And hopefully that's exactly what you can do with some of the things that we've talked about today. And just a bit of an overview of where all of this comes from. So Project Samurai program, the implementation program is built around delivering more successful projects. And there are 3, and it's on a human interpersonal dynamics basis. We're fully skilled and competent in the technical and in the administrative and procedural. We've got all of that down pat, but this is about being better as a human and getting the best out of people that you're working with. So there are 3 core pillars of project success in that respect. And they are self-mastery, bringing the best of yourself to work. And we've got 3 modules for that. Then there's working with your teams. And there's 3 modules for that. And then we've got stakeholders. And that's the bit that we've just been talking about. And we gave you a little bit about lead up and out. So where to from here? If you want to know more information about any of this or discuss anything more about this, happy to do it on LinkedIn. Give us an email. The other thing I'd like you to know is that I'll be posting every week with a little bit more, just some ideas and abstracts and things, just to start some conversation about this whole program. That'll be happening ongoing, and I'll be, aiming to deliver something once a week. And then another little 20-minute session on a Thursday or Friday, depending on how my week is going. But that's my aim, and I would love for you to join me on this quest. And any of your feedback is absolutely critical to me, just to make sure that I'm steering this in the right direction and giving you as much value as you want or as you need. Anyway, that's it from me. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one.